campus of North Idaho College and today's broadcast of the North Idaho College Public Forum. The crew is comprised of North Idaho College television students. Your moderator is North Idaho College political scientist Tony Stewart.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Last week on our program we were dealing with radiation and health hazards, as you recall, for those who viewed that program. This week we wish to continue in part 2 to discuss the whole question of radiation and the damage to our environment. Particularly we wish today to address air and water and aquifer problems that comes from certain types of radiation, in particular storage of nuclear waste at such sites as Hanford in Washington. In order to deal with this subject, it is my special privilege to welcome to our program 2 guests today. First of all is Mr. Tim McNeil, who presently serves as the co-editor of the Idaho Sun newspaper. Mr. McNeil holds a baccalaureate degree in environmental education from Michigan State University. He's also active across this state of Idaho and the Northwest with alliances and organizations dealing with this subject. Mr. McNeil, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Tony.
I'm also very happy to welcome to the program Cassandra Picard, who is a tribal member of the Nez Perce tribe in Idaho. She also serves as a delegate to the Internation Indian Treaty Council. And most recently, in September of 1981, she spoke before the Conference on Human Rights of the United Nations that was held in Geneva, Switzerland. Ms. Picard, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
I would also like to welcome back this week from last week our 2 panel members that so eloquently presented the questions for our guest. First of all is Mary Lou Reed, who is a regular member of our panel, and our second panel member is Brian Scott, who is a pre-med student at North Idaho College. Welcome to both of you.
I've never been called eloquent before. Thank you, Tony.
Well, in my book you have been that way many times.
Fantastic, fantastic.
Lou will start the questioning.
Yes, you're both traveling with a program called Water for Life. And I'm very curious about how Water for Life was conceived, what it is, and who all's a part of it. Cassandra, could you tell me what Water for Life is?
Water for Life is just mainly, it's not an organization, it's mainly just an awareness tool for the public concerning the water.
Is it a coalition in a sense? It's interesting the fact that you as a tribal member got together with someone like Tim, who is active in anti-nuclear organizations. How did you all find each other?
Well, I think it was because he had found out some of the things that I've been doing as far as working for the water, dealing with the fish, controversies that our tribe has been having.
So he saw the logical connection, bringing in the questions that your tribe has, and probably other tribes, and working together to bring this to people. Is that right, Tim? Do you want to expand on this?
Yeah. Water for Life actually began about a year ago when some of the Indian people on the Duck Valley Reservation in southern Idaho came to us and with a proposal to produce a concert in Boise and to use the proceeds for creating a greater awareness of water problems and showing how the nuclear issue relates to water issues in the state of Idaho. So it was the Indian people that originated it. And they came to us, and we felt, I have felt very fortunate ever since that they made that approach, that I've learned a great deal from my association with the people of Duck Valley and with some of the other Indians in the state.
Then what does Water for Life think are the principal problems that you really have to... Can you give us sort of a 1, 2, 3? What are your focal points that you're trying to talk about as you go around the state?
Okay. I don't know that you can say that Water for Life thinks, because it isn't an organization. It is sponsored in Idaho by several separate organizations, including the Duck Valley People to Protect Wild Horse, and they are very concerned about protecting their water resource, which is Wild Horse Reservoir. It is sponsored also by several anti-nuclear and safe energy groups in the state. And one of our major focuses has been the injection of radioactivity into the Snake River Plain aquifer in southern Idaho, which obviously is a water issue. But we've tried to be a little broader than the issues that we had already focused on, and try and include other things with that. And as we've traveled around, you know, everywhere I go, I find something else. I meet up with the Nez Perce people and find out about fishing rights and about the sacredness of water in their own lives. In Lewiston, we talked about some of the issues with some of the corporations down there that are causing a pollution problem. In the agricultural community, there are water issues, both the need for water for irrigation and also the effect to the water from some of the runoff it carries with it the soil. It's not only a loss of soil, but it's a contamination of the water. And it, you know, anywhere you look in our lives, you see issues. You know, it's easy to recognize that water is critical to each and every one of us. We cannot live without it. And everything we do with the water, in fact, everything we do, even if it doesn't directly relate to the water, has an effect on it. And basically what it has become, the Water for Life philosophy has become an organizing tool, as Cassandra mentioned, to allow us to begin communication with people that we might not otherwise speak with. The Water for Life concept has been adopted by communities and groups throughout the nation in the past several months. And, for instance, it's being used to open up communication between uranium miners and Indians in South Dakota, people who normally are not on the best of terms and therefore don't communicate well, but they recognize a common need and a common bond in the water.
So you really are building a water network.
Yeah.
That's very special. Thank you.
Brian Scott.
Mr. McNeil, which do you feel is a more important issue in 1980, the nuclear arms race or nuclear energy concerning humanity?
Well, when I first got involved in the nuclear question, and I've been doing some research and reading publications and so forth on nuclear questions for a couple of years now, I was concerned about the energy issues, the nuclear power issues. But in my, in some of the recent things that are happening with the tightening of standards for nuclear power plants, and I think that's in direct response to not just the rantings of the environmentalists. I mean, the events at Diablo Canyon, I think, demonstrate that they did find that there were actual problems. But also the industry seems to be dying under its own weight. It's a financial problem anymore, more than it is a health problem. And so a lot of our attention has been refocused away from the nuclear power questions and into the arms race question, which I feel is a much greater threat to our survival.
Do you feel that nuclear stockpiling is taking food, clothes, and shelter away from the people of the world?
Sure, I do. When we spend $1.5 trillion, which is truly an unimaginable figure, when we spend $1.5 trillion over the next 5 years to keep the arms race going, and it's not producing anything that's usable in our society. You can't live in an army tank. You can't wear a B-1 bomber. You can't eat, an MX missile. These things are not of value to our society. And there have been economic studies done that show there are more jobs created. There's a greater benefit to society by spending that same kind of money, or even part of that money, on human needs. For instance, if we were to take half of that $1.5 trillion, we could put $10,000 into insulation and solar retrofitting on every single residential building in the United States. And imagine what that would do to our energy needs.
What do you say to the notion that we must stockpile nuclear weapons to preserve peace?
I can't agree with it. First of all, I think the fact that we already have something on the order of 30,000 nuclear weapons, that we have the capability of killing every single Russian, not just once, but perhaps 20 times, to me that seems like more than enough. And you know, we've already got them. I'm not suggesting that we need right now to take them all apart, but I do think we could stop. And I think that taking that kind of step to propose a freeze, even a temporary one, on the arms race would be a real great step towards peace. It would show that we truly intend and have a sincere devotion to the cause of peace. So I believe that we're at a point, at a real turning point here, where we have to decide what our priorities are. Do we want to continue to threaten the world? Do we want to make our international policies based on rattling swords, or do we want to make it on a basis of kindness and understanding and sympathy towards the rest of the world? I mean, we're all in this, it's a little lifeboat, it's been compared to that, and we're all in it together. And shaking our end of the lifeboat isn't going to make it any, shaking the other end of the lifeboat isn't going to make it any safer for our end.
Ms. Picard, I have a question for you that I got from Newsweek magazine, March the 20th, 1978, and according to their statistics, an awful lot of energy sources are on Western lands that are American native lands, 25 to 40% of all uranium and a third of the coal deposits and some of our reserves in oil and natural gas and other things. Now, some of these deposits in certain areas of energy might lead back to the question of nuclear energy and so forth. I know from a discussion with you and others that your people in the various American native nations or Indian nations aren't in agreement. In other words, there are companies in this country who are very eager to get to that, and they are even renegotiating some of the lease with some of the tribes. And is it not correct that some members of some of the tribes are very eager to renegotiate and to explore and take those natural resources and take the money to work with their people, and others are wanting to keep things in their natural setting? And this, I know you have an interest because of the water and the quality and Mother Earth and so forth. Would you take my very long question and respond to it by giving me your viewpoint, or at least reporting to our viewers what is happening among the various tribes to deal with this conflict between profit-making and keeping a natural surrounding?
Well, there's two parts. It's political, just like it is in the United States government. There's political forces on both sides, and one side of the fence wants industries and progress, or whatever you would call, and the other side would like to see the earth taken care of and not used and abused. I happen to be, the water happens to be very sacred to me, and I don't believe that industry and anything is going to save the earth in the long run. If the earth has no water, it makes no difference how much money we have in our pockets. The reason that there's so many different sides to it in between the tribal members is that some of them are very poverty-stricken right now. They do get grants from the government, and a lot of those grants right now are being all cut off, and it's making it very easy for the governments, the federal government and the state governments, to come in and say and offer money, and it looking and make it look good to people who are living in a poverty-stricken world, far worse than say other cities or other areas.
You also made an interesting comment to our students today when you indicated that there was somewhat of a division, at least in your own experience, I believe, between age groups and which ones want to develop and which ones do not.
My belief is that the middle-aged group of now went through a period in time where the belief for the earth, the sacredness to them, the religion, the water has always been a part of their religion and a part of the way of life of the Indian people. And a lot of the customs, the language, the customs, were always looked down upon by the white people. The missionaries came in and totally destroyed any positive belief that they had in their religious sense of life and the oneness with the earth that the Indian people have always had. The Indian people always thought that they were caretakers of this land, and once the thought of being able to sell land and put fences up on lands, to buy and sell water and for electricity and stuff like that came into view, they were kind of, they grew up in this era, and they were beaten and tortured for, like I say, exercising their culture. And nowadays, the younger ones are wanting to revert back to that feeling, because there's an instinct, I believe, in every one of us to go back to the way it was, or at least hold on to some of it. All of that was always a part of the Indian way for ever. And I believe that the Indian people have that instinct within them to revert back to their culture. And the younger people are starting to feel this need, and there are older people, like I say, who have been afraid all these years, and who still are afraid of that kind of thing.
Thank you.
Progress.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you've joined our program in progress, we this week are carrying out part 2 of a 2-part series concerning contamination of our environment, our water, and our air, and the whole question in particular of radiation. Our guests today are, first of all, Tim McNeil, who is the co-editor of the Idaho Sun newspaper, and Cassandra Picard, who is a member of the Nez Perce tribe, and she also is a member, delegate to the Internation Indian Treaty Council. We shall continue the questioning with Lou Reed.
Well, Cassandra, I'd just like to follow up a little bit more on this, what I think is, just a very, very important subject. When you're suggesting that the young people are really ready to return to traditional ways and traditional values, and obviously time is on your side, but at this point, how does it look in terms of factions? Are the young people going to be able to continue to hold that hope if indeed there is too much poverty? And
I believe that.
how's the power structure?
The power structure.
No, go ahead. Finish what you were going to say.
I believe that the young people are striving for the old ways because it was survival, and it was a way of living. It was a way of life, and the colonialism that I'm talking about right now is real new to the Indian people, as far as the newness. It was 200 short years that everybody was turned over to a completely new way of life. The Indian people, I think, are more susceptible to living on the land or whatever, and getting back to reverting back to nature or whatever.
Well, let's talk just very briefly about the fishing rights, because it isn't quite central. On the other hand, Tim has suggested that was one of the things that came in. Do the people who are your age in the tribe really feel pretty strongly about the treaty rights, and is this the urge to rebel against the state, not rebel, but to oppose the state's position, which would take away from those fishing rights? Is this universally accepted among the tribe, or is it again the young people who are holding out for the treaty rights?
It's universally accepted. The old people and the young people all fish. It's something that's handed down over and over again, because it's also a part of our religion and the lessons that we learn between our daily lives with the sacredness of the animals and the fish, the air, and the water. Yeah, the old people do like for all of us to fish and hunt, and the treaty, our forefathers also felt the same way, that same need for fishing and hunting, because it was explicitly stated in every treaty that the fishing and hunting rights should be saved.
And the federal courts have upheld this all the way along.
Yes.
Would you just take 1 second or 1 minute to explain what the Rapid River situation is? I really have been talking about this without telling our viewers what the fishing right issue is with your tribe.
Okay, basically what it boils down to is poor management on the part of the state of Idaho in managing the fish resource. The Indians, the Nez Perce Indians, caught a very minuscule amount of salmon as compared to the fisheries of the Columbia, the ocean fisheries. The state of Idaho had a right to manage these fish the minute they got into Idaho, all the way up to the hatcheries. And what had come out in court when we were going through the Rapid River trials was that there were a number of things that the state of Idaho did not do as far as managing those fish properly, and then thereby when the fish population was low, blaming it on the Indian catch, which obviously wasn't very much as compared to the other sources.
So that's the basic conflict between the Fish and Game and the Indian.
Well, the basic complaint was that they had no rights to abrogate our treaty rights. Not only did they not tell us that they were going to close the river, but they just kind of did it, and without considering the Indians or what they would do.
Thank you.
Brian Scott.
Mr. McNeil, with our conventional power methods, we have made the error of taking our air and our soil and our water for granted, as well as mankind. With nuclear power, do you feel that we're taking mankind, or we're putting mankind in even more of a jeopardy? Are we overlooking the effects on environment and mankind with nuclear energy?
Certainly there's a big environmental question. You know, it's quite obvious that there are sources of energy that are cleaner than nuclear power. Coal has its faults as well. We're fortunate in the Northwest to have all this cheap hydroelectric power, but there's problems for that, in that it eliminates some of the fish that the Nez Perce and other people depend on. I could go from there into energy conservation. The people in the United States use just tremendous quantities of energy. We waste tremendous quantities. There are European countries, highly industrialized countries, that have a lifestyle comparable to ours, but use something on the order of 50% of the energy that we do. And I see conservation as being the ultimate answer, at this point anyway, towards resolving a lot of our energy problems here. As far as environmental consequences of nuclear power, I think Dr. Hummel addressed that question when he did the program here, that there are consequences from any radioactive releases, and it's released all through the fuel cycle, from uranium mining to fuel processing to use in the power plant to waste storage. All of these questions, all of these parts of the nuclear spectrum are releasing radioactivity, and very small quantities of radioactivity can be harmful. Obviously, the more you get, the worse it is, but they're harmful to other living things as well as they are to humans. Humans seem to be one of the most radiosensitive animals. Cockroaches, for instance, are 500 times more radioactive resistant than we are, so they may inherit the Earth.
Okay. With our growing population, which is estimated to reach 6 billion by the year 2000, do you feel that we will have enough energy to feed, clothe, and shelter this population without nuclear energy?
I think we can. I honestly think we can. I think, first of all, that we're going to have to accept that certain things will not be a part of our society if we're going to try and be fair about it and distribute our wealth, fairly among the people of the world. Part of, it's kind of a loaded question, because part of what you're saying is that we're having a population boom, and I think that's something that affects all of our resource use, not just energy resources. But I think it's also something that we need to be concerned about. I don't know. I think there are, we may have to face the fact that if we don't do something about some of these questions, that the Earth will do it for us. Other populations that live on the Earth, whether it be deer or fish or whatever it happens to be, they seek a natural balance, that they level out at some point. And we're still climbing that steep hill to wherever it goes. I don't know. Humans are vastly different than the rest of the animal population in that we've been able to control the environment in the way that we do. I think in some ways that's part of what Cass is saying, that there's a respect for the earth and a closeness to it, a spiritual value there, that the Indian people, many of the Indian people, have managed to hold on to. And I think the non-Indian community has lost sight of that, that we've
Yeah,
depended
maybe
more and
we could take
more
a
on
lesson.
technology to find all the answers for us.
Yeah.
So I would like to suggest that people take a little bit of heed to that, to
Follow the
find
Indian
themselves
example.
in nature.
Mr. McNeil, I hate to put a damper on what I sense as optimism from some statistics you gave us, but isn't it quite concerning to you that you gave a statistic today that nuclear testing waste has to be, stored somewhere? That's already been done. I'm not talking about future. Hopefully we could control that. But of the nuclear testing waste, you gave us the figure that about 25% of that is stored at INEL, which is in eastern Idaho. And is it not correct that some more is stored at Hanford? If that be the case, since it's in our backyard, in our neighborhood, I have heard many reports that there are no containers or no system that any of that can be stored in that will last as long as the radiation itself. If that is correct, do we face in future generations in the Northwest a danger from this after a period of time, or is it already leakage from that storage in those particular areas?
Well, there already is a danger of sorts. It's been documented that something like 115,000 gallons of radioactive water leached out of some holding vats at Hanford and has become part of the Columbia water. There is injection of radioactivity into the wells in eastern Idaho and radioactive releases into the atmosphere. We've created it. We've created our Frankenstein. Now what we're going to do with it is a real difficult question to deal with.
Very few people know these statistics, do they? In other words, is that part of your process is education of this fact?
Certainly, that's a great deal of it. See, decisions are being made every day which affect how these questions are answered, and those decisions will be made either with us or without us. Since they affect each and every one of us, it's important that we become informed about these questions and that we have a voice in the decision-making process.
How do you buy the argument oftentimes given that it's so technical and complex we have to leave it to the technical experts to make the decision?
Well, they may be technical questions in some respects, but they're also very human questions. There's a morality question that's involved with all of this, with arms race and with production of nuclear weapons and nuclear materials. And
I wish we could continue. I'm so sorry we're out of time, but
too.
that always happens on this program. I want to thank both of you very much for being with us today. We appreciate it very much, and thank the panel again for outstanding questions. Ladies and gentlemen, on this program we've been discussing the question of air and water and the whole question of contamination and what might happen. Our guests have been Tim McNeil, co-editor of the Idaho Sun, and Cassandra Picard of the Nez Perce Tribe. Hope you enjoyed our program. We'll be with us again next week at the same time. Have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
The North Idaho College Public Forum can be seen at this same time each week over this station. This production was videotaped earlier by a North Idaho College student crew for viewing at this more appropriate time.